The music industry was changing. It was the final year I would be buying strictly vinyl, because the following year compact discs would hit the market and come into my life in a big way. There were a lot of changes in the way I listened to music, and also a lot of good albums that nobody ever saw. And that is what I discovered, because I have a lot of those. And we'll be talking about some of them. The year was 1985. I'm TC Kirkham. This is Vinyl Recall. Hey, year by year fans and VC members, I'm TC Kirkham, TKR Video Central and the Kirkham Report. Welcome to Vinyl Recall, based on Vinyl Richie's thread that he started a year or so ago, where everybody's giving their top 10 albums of each year. We're up to 1985, and music had started to change. I have a lot of different styles, a lot of different new things in here, as well as some of the old stuff that you would be notable of. And I got an honorable mention that I'm going to talk about at the end that wasn't in my top 10 because, and it would have been, but there was something about it that I just decided to disqualify it. So we'll talk about that later. But right now, let's get into my top 10 albums on vinyl from 1985. Now, I have a lot of stuff from 1985 that I eventually bought on CD that I never had the albums by. But these are my favorites overall. I had to go through my whole collection and find what I wanted. And we're going to start it off at number 10. This was a blind buy for me. I was in the local record store that I had previously worked at. I had been laid off a few months earlier. And recommended to me by my former boss. He's like, this is a great album. You'll love it. So I'm like, well, I got a little bit of extra cash. I will check it out. And you know what? I never really knew the band. I heard one song on MTV. But the solo debut was fantastic. It was pop metal at its finest from one of the top players of the genre. Number 10 for 1985, the debut solo album from Rainbow's Joe Lynn Turner, Rescue Me. Great album. It came with a lyric sleeve and pictures of who was in the recording band with him. Really terrific stuff. He was on Elektra, of course. The sad thing is, this never did produce anything major as far as hits go, but it was really a great album. Rescue You, Feel the Fire, Endlessly, Loving You, Young Hearts, Get Tough, Soul Searcher, The Race Is On, Eyes of Love, and On the Run. It was a terrific debut. It didn't sell that well, I don't think, and I don't remember anything else coming out by him that jumps out at me that way, the way this one did. I loved this from beginning to end, from the second I put it on. So my former boss was correct, and always enjoy it. I still enjoy it. He does power ballads and rock numbers equally well. And if you've not heard it, try to find it. I don't know if it's on the streaming services. I've never really looked. Number 10 for 1985, Joe Lynn Turner and his debut solo album, Rescue You. Number 9 might be a surprise to some people because, well, then again, if you've seen me talking about Manhattan Transfer, so maybe this won't surprise you. I was listening to a whole variety of stations in 1985. I was living in Lancaster, Ohio. I would be there until I moved to Boston area. Listening to a lot of Columbus stations, listening to Logan, listening to a few other places. And they all had different stuff. And a lot of the easy listening stations picked up a song off this album that I loved. And I'm like, oh, it's not out on a single. I'm going to have to buy the whole album. Well, I'm glad I did, because it's a top-notch album, number one. And it's also introduced me to the jazz stylings of this man. He is really terrific. My number 9 album for 1985, Michael Franks and Skin Deep. This features the 2 hits, Your Secret's Safe With Me and When I Give My Love to You. Read My Lips was also a minor hit. Also includes Let Me Count the Ways, Don't Be Shy, Queen of the Underground, Now I Know Why They Call It Falling, Please Don't Say Goodbye, and When She Is Mine. Both Your Secret's Safe With Me, which is the song that got me to buy it, and When I Give My Love to You, which was a duet with Valerie Carter, I believe, were major hits on Columbus AC radio. Let me just check real quick. I've forgotten. No, Brenda Russell, I'm sorry. I knew it was one of those ladies that had that soft, silky voice in the mid-'80s. Frank was best known as a jazz performer, a jazz vocalist, and jazz fusion on Warner Brothers. There's a song that I could swear by that was performed by him that I've never been able to find. I only heard it once, and I became kind of obsessed with it. A song whose title I believe is I Found It. But I've never been able to track it down, even looking on Discogs and on the online services. So it may not have been him, and it may not have been the title. But I was pretty sure it was his sound on the voice. This has a great list of musicians on it also. So many people played on this thing. He is terrific, and this album is top-notch. Number 9 for 1985, Michael Franks and Skin Deep. Number 8 was a debut album for this duo. I loved this album. I liked the second album even better, and it'll be coming up, I'm sure, in 1987. But that album bombed. This was actually a minor hit. People called them a Wham ripoff. I didn't think that was deserved. Their music did not particularly sound like the music that George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley were putting out. I think they deserve better than they got, and I still love them to this day. And it's a shame that they never really took off on the States. They only had one really big hit, which came from a 1990 movie, I believe. And then they had a remake of Bobby Caldwell's What You Won't Do for Love that was a hit later. But this one, despite several tries to get a couple of songs off the ground on this, it never really got that high on the chart. Number 8, the self-titled debut from Go West. Love this album. Of course, Go West is Richard Drummey and Peter Cox. We Close Our Eyes, Don't Look Down, Call Me, Eye to Eye, Haunted, SOS, Goodbye Girl, Innocence, and Missing Persons. Great synth pop at its best. This does have a sleeve. Once again, kind of a photo of the guys and lyrics. It is on Chrysalis Records. Loved them. The second album, Dancing on the Couch, completely bombed in the States. I don't know how, because that album was one of the best albums. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. But this debut was pretty good, despite 2 different tries at making Don't Look Down a hit. First off this album, and then a remix, which came off of a later remix 12-inch, I think. Didn't go anywhere. Call Me didn't go anywhere. We Close Our Eyes peaked at number 40. They deserve better. Go West, number 8 for 1985. Number 7, I talked about a couple of shows ago, last show. This one is interesting because it actually produced their only top Hot 100 hit to date. It peaked at 62, I think it was. I played it on Obscuria a few months ago. But there was no doubt this was expected to be much bigger than anything they'd done. And while they did make the Hot 100, it didn't do that well. It got radio airplay, not in Columbus, but around the country, especially in New York and Los Angeles. And while there were executive producers involved from the usual companies, the album itself was produced by Howie Rice, who was best known for his work with the Pointer Sisters. As a result, you get a more mature sounding, honest to goodness dance vibe album. There's a couple of ballads, but most of them are dance vibes. And it is really a good album. It is also the album that introduced the man that would become, or the then barely a teenager, who would go on to become one of the biggest selling Latin artists of all time. Number 7, the self-titled RCA album from Menudo. This features, once again, Roy Rosello, Ray Acevedo, Charlie Masso, Robbie Rosa, and 13-year-old Ricky Martin. Hold Me, You and Me All the Way, Come Home, When I Dance With You, Don't Hold Back, Explosion, Oh My Love, Chocolate Candy, Transformation, and Please Be Good to Me. Now the strange thing is, I said a couple of these songs on this album were on the previous Spanish language album, which came out in between, Evolucion. And I like them better in Spanish. I'm sorry. Chocolate Candy is much better in Spanish. But Hold Me was their only American Hot 100 hit. It got a lot of airplay on MTV, on Nick Rocks on the MTV networks. But off this album, Hold Me, You and Me All the Way, Come Home, Explosion, all hit the PNR charts, the TKR charts. And Please Be Good to Me bubbled under the Hot 100 for a couple weeks. So it wasn't a total loss. It was their biggest selling album in the States, and it deserved to be. It was absolutely great. Number 7 on my list for 1985, Menudo by Menudo. Number 6 was originally higher, and I kept finding stuff I liked better from 1985. Now, I love this album. It is my favorite album by him, but well, actually, no, they're equal. Him and the first album, which I also mentioned earlier. This is the album that truly made him a star in the States, and it deserved to because it had some great stuff on it, although only the one song was a really big hit, and the others were minor hits, and the album stuff was fantastic, too. It was a number 1 album, and it deserved to be, and it was fantastic. I just wish he'd done better in the States than he did, because he deserved better. Number 6, The Secret of Association by Paul Young. This is the breakthrough album that includes Every Time You Go Away, also Bite the Hand That Feeds, I'm Gonna Tear Your Playhouse Down, Standing on the Edge, Soldiers' Things, Everything Must Change, Tomb of Memories, One Step Forward, Hot Fun, This Means Anything, and I Was in Chains. Again, a lot of photos on the inner sleeve. And he was, of course, on Columbia. Every Time You Go Away, number 1 hit for him. But I truly love You're Gonna Tear Your Playhouse Down. I love that song. Everything Must Change. Everything Must Change. Also great. Those were the 3 singles. But I also love I Was in Chains, which is this gut-wrenching song about prisoners heading for Australia back in the 1800s. It's a fantastic song. Young was always great. I love No Parlay. I love this one. And like I said, he was the first artist I ever bought a poster by that wasn't a scantily clad female. So that's pretty cool. Number 6. Gotta get it right here. Number 6, Secret of Association by Paul Young. Number 5 is an album by an artist 99% of the vinyl community has never heard of. And you know what? This album is fantastic. I have loved it since it came out. And it got tons of airplay on Nick Rocks. It got some airplay on MTV. And it deserved better than it got. And so did this kid. He was brilliant. I don't know why he didn't take off, because his talent was explosive. I mean, this really deserved so much better than it got, and it was one of my favorite albums that year. It's London-tinged R&B, and it was terrific. 15-year-old kid named Warren Mills. Any of you know who Warren Mills is? No, I didn't think so. His biggest hit in the States was a song called Biochemistry, but he did have a song on the album called Flame in the Fire that appeared in some cheesy 80s action comedy. I don't remember which one. I've seen the video for it. Also, Sunshine, Tell Me What You Want, Choosy Girl, Don't Tell Me About Your Boyfriend, You Thrill Me, I Like It Like This, It's Peculiar, and I Turn to You. Whether he's doing dance stuff, ballads, or straight out smooth, what do they call that? Slow jam, R&B. This album is phenomenal, and nobody knows it. And it deserves better. I don't know what happened to him. He was on Jive Records, which was distributed by Arista. I don't think I had an album on Jive before him. I would have plenty after him. This was just one of the most underappreciated, underseen albums anytime in the 80s, but especially in 1985. If you don't know the name, he's hard to find, but you can find the videos for Biochemistry and Flame in the Fire on YouTube. I urge you to check him out, particularly if you like 80s R&B. Warren Mills, number 5. Number 4, I've loved this album since it came out. I never had the album until recently, but I did have a tape of it from a friend, and I did listen to it all the time on streaming services. And then they released a copy of it for Record Store Day 2019. I picked it up in 2020. I love this band anyway, but this is my favorite work, and probably because it is so familiar, because the best known song on the album was picked up as used as a theme song for a TV show, and that's how I initially got into them, although I had heard them before that and didn't realize it. And I remain a huge fan. This is the Record Store Day edition from the 2019, but it originally was released in 1985. Number 4, The Park by Tangerine Dream. This includes the title track, which was the theme from the TV series Street Hawk. It is on this version, this repressing is on yellow vinyl. Their music, I found their music through Les Park, and also through music they did for The Falcon and the Snowman. A song called Going West is on the flip side of This Is Not America by Pat Metheny and David Bowie. And I really fell in love with that stuff, and I've been looking for their stuff and keeping it close to my heart ever since. I bought several Record Store Day stuff from them since I rejoined the vinyl community. I just really love their stuff. And this is my favorite album. Number 5, Le Parc. Number 4, sorry, Le Parc by Tangerine Dream, 1985. Number 3, the last album on Cotillion from this lady before she jumped to Motown Records. She was almost 18 at the time she was recording this, and it was really terrific. This, again, did not get the attention it deserved on the pop chart, and I've always thought the pop side gave her the shaft. She should have done better than she did there. She should have had the same fame and glory that Whitney Houston would later have, and the coming back Tina Turner, and they were just really fantastic, but nobody could do things like this woman. And she's still got a voice. I've heard her on a recent documentary, and she has still got it, and I wish she'd come back to the studio. I know she gave it up in 1990, but it still hurts. I'm just glad we have all what she did do, because it's fantastic. Number 3 for 1985, Stacey Lattisaw, and I'm Not the Same Girl. This includes Can't Stop Thinking About You, Coming Alive, Now We're Starting Over Again, He's Just Not You, I'm Not the Same Girl, Toughen Up, Together, and I Thought It Took a Little Time. This was actually the first album, I believe, that she did that they insisted she use a different producer. I don't know why Cotillion suddenly took that turn after monster hits with Narada Michael Walden, but this was produced by Prince Street Productions. It's great, and it wasn't a big hit, and none of the songs were big hits. The title track especially is my favorite song. I am imploring all of the vinyl community, if you don't know this woman, if you've never really paid attention to her, and you are a fan of Whitney Houston, of Adele, of Beyonce, she was there first. Listen to her. Number 3, Stacey Lattisaw, I'm Not the Same Girl. Number 2 is going to be controversial, but not for the reasons most people think, because most critics hated this album. And I do not understand why. The first album was so huge, it was inevitable that he would never be able to live up to it again. But the second album was such a massive disappointment compared to the first album that the third album kind of got shafted out of the box. And I'll tell you something, this is my favorite album by him, even more so than the one I had in my top 10 for 1980 or 79, whichever, when it came out, late 79. This album is, without a doubt, his best in my opinion. Lyrically, musically, he is fantastic, and this album, screw the critics, deserves way better than it gets. My number 2 album for 1985, Christopher Cross and Every Turn of the World. This album is his third album. The only hit to come off this album, and it was a minor hit, was Charm the Snake. Also, Every Turn of the World, I Hear You Call, Don't Say Goodbye, It's You That Really Matters, Love is Love in Any Language, Swing Street, Love Found a Home, That Girl, Open Your Heart. These songs are equal to his debut album, which won 5 Grammys, 6 Grammys. Nobody gives this album respect, and damn it, it deserves it. Love is Love in Any Language, Every Turn of the World. Every Turn of the World is my favorite song by him because it's a very positive song and says, you know, every day is full of challenges, but you can make it because every day is new with every turn of the world. This album rocks. If you've not heard it, listen to it. Compare it. Another Page, which came out in between his debut album and this one, it's so pale and bland compared to both of those. This album deserves better than it gets. Number 2, Every Turn of the World, Christopher Cross. Finally, number 1 for 1985. And this might surprise people, but I was working at Buzzard's Nest when this came out. It wasn't too long after that I was let go. And I loved the guy. I had singles. I would later have the albums on CD, a couple of the earlier albums on CD. But I remember when this came out, we ran out of it. We had tons of copies. We opened at 10. We were out of it by 11:30, and we had to wait until almost 6 o'clock that night to get more in. Had to disappoint a lot of people that day. But I'll tell you something. This album, to me, is one of his most underrated albums. Even though it did produce, you know, several hits, it's underrated compared to a number of his other albums. And it deserves better, again. Although, if you're a fan of his, you already know that. My number 1 album of 1985, Around the World in a Day, Prince and the Revolution. The follow-up to Purple Rain, that was going to be impossible to match the bar of that album, but he came damn close with this. I gotta get my lamp because all the songs are in different colors and such. This album features Around the World in a Day, Paisley Park, Condition of the Heart, Raspberry Beret, Tambourine, America, Pop Life, The Ladder, and Temptation. Raspberry Beret and Pop Life were both big hits off this album. The title track got quite a few quite a bit of airplay as an album track. Why does this album always get left in the dust? People will talk about 1999, they'll talk about Purple Rain, they'll talk about Parade. They never bring up another Around the World in a Day, and I don't know why. It is truly one of Prince's best albums. Raspberry Beret is one of my favorite songs of his. Love that song. This album continues the Purple Rain vibe, and that was what made it work. And again, like I said, it doesn't seem to have the appreciation that some of his other stuff does, and it deserves to. There's nothing wrong with it by any stretch of the imagination. The only album by him that I love more is the Purple Rain soundtrack. I love that album. Couldn't put it on these because I only have the CD. But this is... I'm glad I had this on vinyl because I was able to give it to you. Up front, hands down, #1 for 1985, Around the World in a Day from Prince and the Revolution. So, recapping my top 10 from 1985. Number 10, Rescue You, Joe Lynn Turner. Number 9, Skin Deep, Michael Franks. Number 8, Go West by Go West. Number 7, Menudo by Menudo. Number 6, The Secret of Association, Paul Young. Number 5, Warren Mills by Warren Mills. Number 4, La Park, Tangerine Dream. Number 3, I'm Not the Same Girl, Stacey Lattisaw. Number 2, Every Turn of the World by Christopher Cross. And number 1, Around the World in a Day by Prince and the Revolution. Now, I do have Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits on vinyl. I didn't pick it. I only have Whitney Houston's debut album and Falco 3 by Falco on CD, so I wasn't able to get those on here. But I would have, if they were vinyl, I probably would have had both of them on here in place of probably Joe Lynn Turner and Michael Franks, but, you know. Now, there's another album from 1985 that I played and played and played constantly. And it didn't make my list because I disqualified it. I did so for a reason. The gentleman who is listed as the performer on this album swears he did not do the vocal on the title track. Now, I listened to this album over and over again. I don't hear any difference between his lead vocal on that song and the lead vocals on the other on the rest of the album. But he insists it's not him. And I guess they have kind of found proof that he did not do that song, the vocal on that song. He lip-synced to it in the video, similar to the way Milli Vanilli did, and then took on the persona for the album. Because this isn't his real name either. So, while I don't have a problem with that, you know, stage names are normal, but this kid completely tried to make a different career. And he's got a way different career now. So, it would have probably made my top 10 somewhere because I love it, but I'm just a little leery about it. This is Yo Little Brother by Nolan Thomas. That's Nolan Thomas on the cover. He swears he did not do the vocal on Yo Little Brother, the song. He has, I mean, Two White and One Bad Apple were the other single off here. And he says, I'm trying to find if he's on here. No, the person he said does the vocals is not on the album. This is on Mirage Records. Nolan goes by his real name these days, Marco Kafka. He is a top photographer and fashion icon in New York City. I mean, you go over to his sites and you can see some of his incredible photography. He's taken some amazing shots of some of the most beautiful people in the world, male and female. He is just terrific. It's a shame because I really thought he was a fantastic vocalist. I guess, you know, with Yo Little Brother, we'll never know, but that's been disqualified from my top 10 because of that controversy. Now we get into the dicey part, because in 1986 I started buying CDs. vinyl was becoming harder and harder to come by in local stores. I still bought it through the end of the decade and into the early 90s, but it's going to be hard picking to try and find vinyl. The next couple years will be okay. But when we get to 88, 89, 90, it's going to be difficult. The CDs had taken over by that point. But I never stopped liking the music. And the music was changing too. 1986 would usher in a new era of laid-back, adult-sounding music, and at the same time, a new rush of teen performers. Menudo had already hit the scene at that point in 1984, and then in 1985 they had their first hit. By 1986 and 87, you would see Debbie Gibson, Tiffany, the New Kids on the Block, and so many others starting to dominate the charts. And you'll probably see one or two of them on here too. 1986 coming up next week. Thank you for watching, and if you have already subscribed to my channel, thank you. I really appreciate it. If not, please do. I definitely hope you will. Don't forget the thumbs up. Please share. I would really appreciate it if you share with other people so they can check me out. And by all means, leave a comment. I love talking to you. I'm trying to answer them now. It's about within an hour or two after they pop up, because I get so far behind if I don't do that. In any case, I enjoy doing these shows, and I enjoy talking to you about them. I hope you've enjoyed my picks, and I hope you'll continue to enjoy them as we go along through the rest of the 1980s and into the 1990s on Vinyl Recall. For Vinyl Recall, I'm TC Kirkham, TKR Video Central, and the Kirkham Report. I will see you soon. Ciao, baby.